Right, so the UN Security Council have actually voted against Israel's interests for once, and they've done so unanimously at that. Well, who would ever thought they'd see the day? Yes, even the US have voted against them, but the response from Israel in light of that, well, sinister would be one word to use in that light. The voting question this time was in relation to a draft resolution to renew the contract for UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, the UN's peacekeeping force that works with the Lebanese army to ensure the integrity of the Lebanese border with Israel remains intact. Tensions, if we can call them that, have escalated significantly on this border between Israel and Hezbollah. I don't know whether you've noticed that, of course. So naturally, the renewal of a UN peacekeeping contract with the nation that is home to Hezbollah permits Israel to, well, once again play the victim card in light of the increased rocket fire across the border by both sides. But this time the Israeli representative's response was less about being the victim in all of this, or not entirely, but also a fear that the safety of UN peacekeepers, well, they might not be able to be guaranteed anymore.
Acceptable that this resolution puts both sides on an equal footing, calling for both to de-escalate. There should have been a clear distinction between Israel and Hezbollah. There should have been a strong condemnation of Hezbollah, who is the sole responsible for the current escalation. The burden of proof here is on the Lebanese government and Hezbollah, not on Israel. In addition, the text doesn't devote appropriate attention to the core problems of Resolution 1701. First, it does not address the breaches of the arms embargo on a daily basis by Iran and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is transferring weapons to Lebanon through land, sea, and air, including through the Beirut airport. Yet there is not one word about it in this text. Second, the text fails to clearly note that there should be no arms south of the Litani other than those of the Lebanese army. Neither the Radwan force nor anything from Hezbollah's arsenal should be present south of the Litani River. The fear for the protection of UNIFIL's force because of Hezbollah's constant intimidation, the desperate attempt to sustain artificial stability at all costs while ignoring Hezbollah's massive military buildup. This reality must change if we wish to create a long-term and sustainable stability in the Israeli-Lebanese border. Let's call a spade a spade.
Right, so that was Israel's permanent representative to the UN, Danny Danon, part of his response to the unanimous vote by the UN Security Council to renew the peacekeeping contract of UNIFIL for another year. Danon whinged, used jazz hands as it happens to complain about the both sidesing of Israel and Hezbollah, or Hezbollah as he put it, potato, frankly. And I'd complain too. Frankly, Israel is at war on something like 7 fronts right now. Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Iraq. Yeah, 7 fronts. And Hezbollah only have beef with Israel right now, 1 front. So yeah, I would complain about being compared to Israel right now as well. But of course that wasn't what Danon was doing. And of course I don't mean to imply with my sarcasm and flippancy there that Hezbollah are not responsible for awful atrocity too, because of course they are. But Israel's whining on this score really has worn impossibly thin by now. Of course we want de-escalation on both sides. That will only happen when Israel, though, is made to leave Gaza and now the West Bank as well, as they've started the largest conflict there in the last 20 years. Of course they'd love to start a greater assault on Lebanon too. The bigger the arena of warfare Israel becomes embroiled in, the more they hope pressure will be piled on the likes of the US to get involved more directly. We know that's what Netanyahu really wants at the end of the day. But then, of course, came the veiled threat, really, the fear for the protection of UNIFIL forces because of Hezbollah's constant intimidation, Danon said. Well, that is exactly what UNIFIL are there for and why they have been there as peacekeepers along that border with their remit being renewed every year since I was born in 1978. UNIFIL are a UN peacekeeping force that monitors the Israel-Lebanese border and has been doing so for the last 46 years now, since tensions really began actually between Israel and Lebanon. 5 days, in fact, after Israel invaded Lebanon, I'll say it again, in March of 1978. So actually UNIFIL are very much on the right side of that border and working with the correct government on one side of that border to maintain that peace. It had been one of the most peaceful of Israel's borders historically until Israel decided to back separatists during the civil war in Lebanon during the 1970s and 1980s, which later ended up giving rise to Hezbollah. So Hezbollah are very much an enemy of Israel's own making, and indeed no diplomatic relations exist between Israel or Lebanon as a result. And as such, the UN patrol that border. They monitor it. They evidence any aggressive activity, let's call it. Now, the work of UNIFIL since the end of the 2006 Lebanon War, which is the last time Lebanon and Israel were formally at war with each other, UNIFIL's duties were enhanced to include ongoing monitoring of the cessation of those hostilities, accompanying the Lebanese armed forces on their patrols, and deal with humanitarian assistance as well to anyone displaced at the border. And it is not a small UN agency either because of the work it does, because of the lengths Lebanon has to go to with the UN's help to maintain the integrity of their border with Israel. It employs 10,000 peacekeepers from 46 different nations. And its mandate is renewed annually every September, although it's August this time around, by the UN Security Council, as has once again happened here, and has an annual budget close to $500 million, all to patrol southern Lebanon along the Israel border. Not only other borders, the Israel border. Now, there's a large part of me that thinks, especially right now, that perhaps if the UN dealt with Israel's aggression in a more meaningful way, you wouldn't need to spend so much money and resources patrolling a border with them. But equally, it tells me that there is little incentive here for Lebanon or Hezbollah to actually attack UNIFIL either, when they've been working together for decades in the interests of Lebanon itself. Though there are critics in Lebanon, and indeed certainly in Israel, that dispute UNIFIL's allegiances. Israel, for example, hate it because they maintain dialogue with Hezbollah, who Israel clearly sees as terrorists. Obviously necessary when they operate on the Lebanese side, though. But some in Lebanon aren't that keen on UNIFIL either after they adopted Security Council Resolution 1701 in 2006, which forbids Lebanese forces, save the Lebanese army itself, from entering a demilitarized zone, which Danny Danon made mention of, south of the Litani River, the so-called Blue Line. Now, you can certainly see why Israel have reacted so sniffily here. UNIFIL wouldn't be needed, wouldn't exist, if not for Israel's actions going back decades against Lebanon. They are a permanent 46-year reminder of Israel's own hostilities due to its own desire for expansionism. But actually, given the increasing aggression across the Israel-Lebanon border, certainly in recent weeks, having already increased anyway since Israel's response in Gaza to the night of October 7th, if UNIFIL is supposedly a peacekeeping force, well, a lot of people might say they aren't doing the best of jobs right now, are they, surely? I suppose you have to appreciate being stationed on one side of the border and one side only. They can't really do much about any Israeli aggression and rocket fire across the border, save report on it, and save give aid and humanitarian responses on the Lebanese side, bringing into question whether they shouldn't actually be stationed on both sides of the border. But equally, they are reporting that rocket fire from the Lebanese side is coming from within that demarcation zone, as this Al Jazeera excerpt explains. The UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, tells Reuters that one of the rockets launched from Lebanon in the heavy exchange between Hezbollah and the Israeli military on Sunday was fired from near a position operated by international peacekeepers. UNIFIL and unarmed technical observers known as UNTSO have long been stationed in southern Lebanon to monitor hostilities along the demarcation line between Lebanon and Israel, known as the Blue Line. It said it had detected a high number of airstrikes and rocket launches in its area of operations, starting on Sunday morning. One such launch was detected from near one of our positions in Haniyeh, UNIFIL spokesperson Candice Ardiel said, referring to a town in southern Lebanon about 10 kilometers, 6 miles north of the border with Israel. Perhaps it is this lack of perceived effectiveness that meant the UN Security Council, despite the pro-Israel presence of nations like the US, the UK and France, have no problem renewing this contract each year. So what if Danny Danon spits rivets and has a 10-minute whine about it? They only do this once a year, and Israel will probably have found something else to whinge about anyway, even if it hadn't passed. My take on it personally is that although the organisation is clearly far from perfect, and despite the cost in finances, equipment and personnel UNIFIL requires to maintain its service, things would certainly be a lot worse without them. Certainly Israeli expansionism northwards is cut off, you would think, by their presence. And ultimately, if Israel were emboldened to try, UN excuses to not intervene at that point, with their own people in the line of fire, 10,000 of them, well, that really wouldn't wash very anymore, would it? Would that put Israel off, though? Well, they got away with Gaza to all intents and purposes so far, haven't they? And now they're starting on the West Bank. Same excuses are being made by their supporters and their allies. Though these really don't carry any weight any more than they did when they made them about Gaza. But should they get away with that and still nobody's stopping them, why would they not try it on with Lebanon again? Hamas were in Gaza, based in Gaza, the elected government in Gaza. Now Hamas are in the West Bank, apparently, according to Israel. Unverified by anyone else, of course, but such is their excuse to strike there now, as well as this video recommendation will tell you all about if you choose to watch it next. Will it be Lebanon afterwards after that, I wonder? Given the history, I wouldn't bet against it. In fact, given the veiled threat against UNIFIL, I doubt they'll wait even that long, depending on what they continue to be permitted to get away with. Do let me know what you think in the comments about that, though, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.